So maybe we can have some more discussion on what we feel is are specific aspects that a student should consider as a role of a student in the PhD process, and maybe what he or she can
before they can get into research? Should they have that kind of a mindset, or should they be very, very hardworking to be able to do research? What characteristics do you think students should have so that their role can be fulfilled as a researcher?
Yeah, I think to begin with, what we said from the beginning is, interest, spirit of learning. I mean, those are really the basic traits that you start out with. You don't start out by saying that I'll do as we said, it may not be path breaking immediately and things. So the initial part of things is the spark and excitement, and these are the words which actually describe our spirits initially. And going back to my experience during my master's degree, for example, I would go and discuss with the advisor, and while we are discussing, the advisor will say, why don't we try this for fun? And that really excited me. And sometimes the reverse would probably happen, that actually without my advisor telling me, I actually did data acquisition for my experimental setup. And then advisor said, oh, this is very exciting. So actually both of us have to really spur excitement in each other about that technical topic. So that's a very important role that both actually complement
So
and proceed further.
passion,
Passion
yes,
and also there is a routine to it. I keep coming back to routine. I don't know why from philosophy, but for instance, most advisors and students meet once a week, right? That happens, and they meet regularly. I think that helps.
Yeah,
Whatever it
regularity is
is,
very
it
important.
helps. I think
it helps in the long run to meet regularly. Even if your advisor is not particular about meeting, it's good to force a meeting once in a while, because there are the exchange of ideas, just you voicing out the ideas, just saying it out loud in front of an advisor helps a lot in clearing things in your head. Regular meetings happen, and what happens in those meetings, who pushes where, like Abhijit says, changes from time to time. There might be times when the student is down and the advisor steps in and says, maybe you look at it this way. There might be times when the advisor is not interested and the student has to jump in. So it changes over a period of time. Some advisors are very hands-on. They work with you on the board, write down, derive, etc. Some advisors will say, I'm not going to be hands-on. You read the paper. It's your problem. And it changes. It's no universal rule. There are benefits and negative points about both. But I would say regular meetings, yes, very important.
So, if I can just make 3 points, which are probably consolidation of what Abhijit and Andrew have been saying. One, I think, is the attitude. The student's attitude makes a big difference. When a student comes to me and says, well, I want to work, I want to really work towards a PhD under your guidance, I say that I don't expect you to have knowledge. Going back to the question, I don't expect you to have the requisite knowledge at all, because knowledge is typically acquired through coursework and learning. What is most important is attitude. If you have the inclination to learn and carry out research, you are ready. And secondly, I think what Andrew was pointing out is some advisors would define the problem for you upfront, whereas some advisors would like you to define the problem, and in that context, they'll give you a few papers and so on. Some students enjoy defining their own problem, some students don't. They want the problem to be predefined, and that plays an important role in choosing your advisor. These days, students, as you said, homework, do a lot of groundwork before, and then find out how, depending on the reputation the advisor has and so on, and choose the advisor. And I think the third thing is sharing your results with the advisor makes a big difference. Some advisors are extremely busy, and some students don't like that. Some students would like to see their advisors every week and share. And simple discussion, like Abhijit said, a simple discussion will, even before the advisor gives you ideas, just a listening ear will actually give you ideas. So I think there are several factors that go into choosing an advisor, and there are several factors to watch out for as a role, as to what your role is. And I think we probably outlined
Right.
most.
Yeah, and at the basic, again, going back to some of the routine, note taking, noting down things, making systematic consolidation of what you have done, what you want to do, time management. There is lot of this that is actually very important, because again, it's a long-term process, and a student must keep on reminding about many of these things and actually implementing some of these things as the time goes on.
And
So
also, just to close out,
Yeah.
one final thing. So initially, you might think that the advisor has more knowledge or more awareness of the area than a student. But at the end of the day, once the thesis is ready, the student is the expert in that topic in the thesis. That's what's expected.
And typically, the advisor looks up to the student to give inputs on what is the next problem to work on. Right?
So that it's kind of a role reversal.
That means you're ready to get a degree.
Yeah, at that point you're ready to leave.
The green signal is on.
And
I would also like to add to something that Arun was saying earlier, which is about the advisor's role in helping you interpret your results. So basically, the advisor brings experience in that area, and that in that relationship as an advisor and a student relationship. So at least in earlier days of your PhD, I mean, as Andrew said, by the end you have more experience in or knowledge in that particular aspect of what you were examining. But in general, in the earlier days of your PhD, your advisor has a lot of experience in that area. And so when you present results to him or her, and you discuss the results with your advisor, often the advisor's role is to help you have perspective on what your work is. So sometimes as a student, because you don't yet have enough experience in the area, you may tend to give a lot of importance to a particular aspect of your result, whereas the advisor may be in a better position to tell you that that is not the most critical aspect of that result that you're presenting, whereas something else may be more interesting. So of course this gives you an opportunity to discuss, to consider your ideas again, and maybe bounce your ideas off with your advisor and so on, and that may help you gain that experience. The kind of experience that your advisor has had over the years is something that is getting transferred to you when you have that interaction. So that's I think where the role of both the student and the advisor sort of come together.
Yeah, so one word about attitude also. I want to say that when it comes to the attitude, we must have a very healthy attitude on keeping the long-term objective, but then doing things on a day-to-day basis in a very steady fashion, keeping the journal, and then moving forward in an incremental manner. There is something called obsessive compulsive disorder, where a person wants something and they want it immediately, urgently, and then smallest obstacle, then the person is totally away from it. Definitely, one should not be under that kind of an attitude. You must be able to keep the long-term goal
Be
in
patient.
mind. Be patient, and then keep chipping away, and then you finally make your thesis.
So
come
be
out.
patient, don't become a patient. So,
So maybe now maybe we'll talk about.
That brings to actually this what Fanny was just saying, that you keep the long term in mind, and with that long term in mind is where inquiries come up, postulates come up. I mean, you start thinking, what can I do? And that basic spirit of inquiry needs to be at the basis of all of your research that you are doing.
Yeah, that's the key difference between a course-based program and research-based program. You learn about something, but you don't stop there when you do research, right? You have to ask questions now. You have to ask, okay, what else can I do in this field? What else are people doing in this field currently? What difference can I make to what they are doing? And then you say, okay, maybe if I try this, this will happen. So that requires, first of all, some sort of an intuitive understanding of the blocks of, intuitive understanding of the different ideas that make up that area. And you say, okay, if you change this idea a little bit, that might happen. So you should be able to analytically reason out, ask the right question, postulate some answer, and then check it out. And then
I think an integral element is persistence, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, this key thing called persistence appears even in data-driven modeling. Of course, I'm talking more technical stuff now, but we say that if you want to really build a model, mathematical model of the process, the inputs have to be persistently exciting. So I keep saying this to my students, that the inputs that you are giving into your research are the questions, and you have to really keep persistently thinking just as the way you're basically hunting for a treasure which is buried underneath the soil, and you can't really say, well, I'll dig a few feet today and then I'll come back a few months later, and then you have to again restart all over again, collect your thoughts and so on. So I think persistence and patience, and it's a complicated thinking that's happening in your mind. It's a wonderful dish, but when before the dish comes out to you, it's all boiling and it's all chaos. But when the stove is switched off and when the dish settles down, then it comes out to a very nice taste, right? So there is going to be chaos before clarity comes in, for sure, in research. And you have to be really able to persist through that chaos and sustain that with the hope of finding that clarity. And when you get that clarity, the joy is unbounded. And that's what I think makes the research, drives the research.
That moment when you something clicks in,
you will forget. It's
joy.
like climbing Mount Everest, and people have forgotten all the pain that has gone into climbing.
Every researcher works for that moment. It's a little bit of a moment. But I've been saying the difference between regular coursework and research work. But let me point out one thing which is often overlooked by people, which is actually very similar. What you should do in research, which you do regularly for coursework. For most courses, I think good students have a notebook. Okay, and they have notebooks. When that notebook ends, they take another notebook. That is very important in research. So don't think that just because research is different from coursework, I won't have a notebook. You will find very few serious researchers who don't have a notebook. Everybody has a notebook. They keep taking notes. They keep looking at something. It may not be a physical note these days. It might be electronic for some people, but there is this notebook, and it's irreplaceable. You have to have a notebook with you. Keep noting down. Work on something regularly. Every single day, the more time you spend on something, more results you'll get. Absolutely no difference.
And I think in research, you have to be prepared to ask even silly questions. There's nothing like silly questions, but even at some point you may question your own knowledge of what you thought you understood for years. And suddenly you come to a point and say, did I really know this? Or sometimes I even say that maybe you sit down and ask, is really 1 + 2 = 3? And so, I mean, there are points, you go through some real moments like that. And you just be prepared. The other integral part of research, I would say attitude, is to be able to take feedback from what you can. And I think feedback is a very, very integral part. Feedback from your meetings with the advisor, feedback from your own results, feedback from the mistakes that you make, everything, even your success gives you feedback, everything.
So there's one student of mine, I remember, he said, I really enjoy working in this area. I thought it will be exciting and everything. But after doing research, I realized that about 80% of my time, I'm not doing the exciting stuff. I'm doing the exciting stuff only 20% of the time. 80% of the time I'm doing either coding up a simulation or doing some setting
It's
up
a 80-20
something.
rule, right?
Yeah. It's a lot of drudgery and routine, and that's actually common for every field. You look at Sachin Tendulkar on the cricket pitch. That's 20% of his time.
True.
For 80% of his time is practicing somewhere,
nets,
is
yeah.
doing in the nets. So that's what happens in every single area. You might enjoy it, I'm sure. Sachin Tendulkar enjoyed his cricket. There's no doubt about it, but it involves an equal amount of routine, and you have to be ready for that. Even if you really are passionate and you enjoy your area, you have to be ready for the
Yeah,
routine.
he's perhaps done a lot of research on how the ball comes from a certain bowler.